In today's deep dive, we're going to cover family rescue cases. And for the past many years, Falun Dafa Information Center has highlighted family rescue cases of Falun Gong practitioners in China who have family members abroad, whether it be in Europe, United States, Canada, and elsewhere. And the persecution of Falun Gong has raged since 1999 and has torn apart countless families and created countless orphans and turned childhood dreams into nightmares. I mean, we just heard about the practitioner who was assaulted in Australia and how when she was in China, her house was ransacked. They take her and her husband away. They just leave the 9-year-old daughter there. And that's the case of millions and millions of Falun Gong practitioners today and since 1999. We want to highlight 3 active family rescue cases because oftentimes these cases do end in tragedy. But these are 3 active cases, and there are actions that you can take as our viewer or a supporter of human rights to help influence them. And the first one is one you might be aware of, which is about New York resident Grace Chen's parents, Mr. Yang Chen and Miss Xun Ming. Grace is only 18, and she actually just testified at the International Religious Summit in 2023. And her testimony was moving everyone to tears. And we have some, we can put some links below, but we reported on that before. And the couple was detained in October of 2020, along with 19 other Falun Gong practitioners, just for studying the teachings of Falun Gong. So we just talked to you about the practitioner in Australia who is forgiving and believes in truthfulness, compassion, tolerance, can forgive someone that beat her. And so these practitioners in China are just trying to study teachings like that teach them to be good people and forgive people and try to act with truthfulness, compassion, tolerance. And for that, they were arrested. The problem is that right now nobody's been able to get in contact with them. And so Grace hasn't been able to get in contact with her parents. Lawyers are being pressured not to take the case. They can't get in contact. And so kind of their well-being is very unknown at this point. And the current location of her parents, as far as we're aware, as of November 2022, as far as we know, is her father is at Wangling Prison and her mother is currently imprisoned at Hunan Province Women's Prison. So we'll put some links below, which will take you to our family rescue page. We'll give you a couple of actions that you can take to help.
For Grace especially, she's rather worried because her parents have been detained and they were persecuted and tortured in detention before. And so having no news is actually worse than
knowing.
Yeah. The second family rescue case is in the United Kingdom. UK resident Xun Ming was notified in February that his mother, Liu Pingtong, was arrested for passing out flyers in China. His family in China called the Domestic Security Office bureau head named Chen about his mother, and Jiao said the authorities are preparing to sentence her 3 to 5 years in prison for talking to others about Falun Gong. This means that they've already decided, even before giving her a chance to defend herself in court.
Right. And we should mention there's no due process, right? So even the persecution of Falun Gong is illegal, even in China. I mean, it has no legal basis. And so when they're arresting practitioners and determining sentences or doing show trials or whatever they're doing, it has really no legal basis, nor does it have sentencing guidelines, of course. So it's completely arbitrary as far as how they're sentenced and where they're sentenced. And the major point here is she hasn't even been put on trial yet. So you can't even, the Chinese Communist Party couldn't even claim or lie that, oh, there's some sort of due process because they've already told them the sentence before there's a trial. So the trial is just, an absolute joke.
The important thing also is 3 years ago, his mother was just released from an 8-year sentence. Chinese authorities had punished her that time also for publicly raising awareness for the persecution of Falun Gong. Her son, Xun Ming, who's in the UK now, was actually back in China at that time, and police forced him to sign a fabricated case document on her behalf, which essentially was served as evidence to sentence her for those 8 years.
And she actually, during that time, they persecuted her so badly she had kidney failure. And then when she had kidney failure, she was in the hospital, but they wouldn't release her. And then what did they tell her son?
The police told her son when they tried to, get her released for medical parole that since his mother was having kidney failure, the police would count her as a natural death if she died, and they wouldn't bear any responsibility for it.
Yeah, it's terrible. It just goes to show, like we've talked about the transnational cases of these people with this hatred, and coming abroad and assaulting, elderly women. And then if you look at these kind of prison guards, and they've just been so indoctrinated with this Chinese Communist Party mentality and this persecution that's been raging for 23 years, that they're willing to do that to an elderly lady, to just say something like, if she dies, kind of, that's a natural death, even though you caused the death. And so I think that the psychological scope of the people in China, whether it be the ordinary citizens that then come abroad and are assaulting people, or the prison guards, there's a whole mentality that's just totally warped and pretty much not human when it comes to this persecution.
No accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely not. On March 3rd, Xun Ming created a change petition for his mother, and in 2 days he received 500 signatures. And so his petition will be in the description box if you're interested in supporting him and his family.
And the third case is one that we have talked about before, but it's about Lucy, who's in Ontario as an award-winning animation student in college. She's 24 years old, and her mother is still in China and was just sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. She was arrested in November 2021 officially, but she was actually abducted by local police in September. And so their life has been totally turned upside down by the persecution of Falun Gong. When Lucy was just 4 years old, which was 20 years ago, and the persecution was just starting, she was abducted from her daycare, and they held her for ransom until they could reach her mom, who they wanted to persecute for practicing Falun Gong. So her entire childhood, we talk about the orphans and we talk about these things. She's another person that her life was totally torn apart, and now she's in Canada, in a free country, and she, her mother has been sentenced again. And so she is currently at Yunnan Province No. 2 Women's Prison, and I believe her daughter's currently living in the Toronto area. And so we'll link in the description below her petition as well. So you can sign that if you'd like to support. There's a couple ways that you can take action, and a couple of them we talked about, such as visiting our Family Rescue page, writing an email or the local representatives in those countries, the U.S., where in the states or provinces where the victims' families are, so that they can actually put public pressure on the Chinese Communist Party. You can also raise awareness by posting these stories and sharing them in social media, which does help, because the more people that are aware of this, the better. And you can even write letters to the prisons where these innocent people are being held. And these letters can sometimes pressure the guards to lessen the persecution, because they're aware that kind of the international scrutiny and awareness is on them. And of course, there's been sanctions recently, so they are afraid of the U.S. and everyone knowing. So this can also have an effect. And above else, I think we have to remember that this persecution of Falun Gong is such a large issue, encapsulates all of China, that when China is brought up and the Chinese Communist Party is brought up, we should bring it up, and you should bring it up with the information we hope we're helping to provide to you in this show. And you think about it, in 1999, there was about 70 to 100 million people practicing Falun Gong, 1 out of every 13 people in China. But when you think about 1 person out of 13, every person has, even with the one-child policy, 4 or 5 family members. You have parents, you have grandparents, neighbors, you have cousins, and then you extend that family to neighbors and coworkers, right? So 1 person easily knows 13. I mean, that's easily, right? Like a close sphere of influence. So when you think about it, 1 out of 13 are practicing Falun Gong, but the persecution of Falun Gong impacts all 13. It impacts all of China, not just less than 10%. Less than 10% are being brutally persecuted, but think about people that have to go along with this and say it's right and not speak up, or see these good people being persecuted. So it impacts all of China, and it has for the last 23 years. And so we see the impact of this when we see the transnational repression, we see these active family rescue cases. And so we hope that you'll check out some of the ways that you can help and sign or do some of the actions that are listed. Thank you for joining us today. And as always, please share and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.